I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting our show off tonight with a trip to the Oregon coast. You may have seen a few weeks ago that 2 sea otters were spotted there, but the 2 visitors that showed up near Cannon Beach in June were just that, visitors. Sea otters have been absent from the Oregon coast for more than 100 years after they were hunted to local extinction. But there's one group that's working hard to bring the creatures back. Environmental reporter Cale Williams has our story.
This beach looks so sculptural.
I see a lot of...
Chanel Hayson gets a lot of reports about sea otters on the Oregon coast.
Wouldn't that be magical if I was like, there he is?
Are there any out there?
It's very, very rare that it's actually a sea otter. I don't see them.
Hayson is the outreach director at the Alaka Alliance,
Usually they hang around the rocks.
a group working to bring sea otters back to Oregon. When she heard reports of sea otters at Ecola State Park,
Yeah.
she responded like she always does.
If you can get me a photo or video evidence, I can determine if it's a river otter, which 99% of the time it is.
Her source hustled to grab some pictures, and
As soon as she sent that email over with a scope photo of a cute little furry face, I was like, that is a sea otter.
the next day, Hayson made a beeline for the coast, hiked out to the beach, and saw something remarkable.
Lo and behold, there was actually 2 out there, which was mind-blowing because that was the first time that I've known of seeing 2 live sea otters out on the Oregon coast together. And I was like, there he is!
Hazen's mind was blown because sea otters have been functionally extinct in Oregon for more than a century.
The last Oregon sea otter that we've been able to find a record of in our research was killed 12 years before my grandfather was born.
That's Peter Hatch, a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and secretary of the Alaka Alliance. From time immemorial, sea otters have held tremendous cultural importance to tribes all along the Oregon coast.
In our stories and traditions, they're seen as a relative, and part of a web of interrelationships that are laid out in those stories.
Sea otters were hunted sustainably by tribes, mostly for their fur.
They're valued because it is the softest, richest, most beautiful fur that exists in nature.
But that changed when settlers moved into the area.
From the 1700s on, all along this coast, all the way up to Alaska for the commercial fur trade, which really exhausted their numbers, not just here, but on much of the West Coast.
Sea otters have been successfully reintroduced in Alaska and Washington. A small population avoided extinction in central California. But in Oregon, the coast has been without this keystone species since the early 1900s. But bringing back sea otters isn't just a vanity project. It's not just because they're cute, though they are, or because they're culturally important to indigenous people. The absence of sea otters has left an imbalance on Oregon's coast.
They have a disproportionately large effect on the ecosystem based to their abundance, or relative to their abundance.
And that's become more apparent than ever over the last decade. Starting in 2014, a wasting disease began wreaking havoc with sea stars all along the West Coast.
It's about 99% of the whole population was decimated, and they haven't made a comeback.
Sea stars are prolific predators of purple sea urchins. So when sea stars disappeared, the urchin population exploded.
Without these top predators, sea urchins are overpopulating and overgrazing on kelp, which is basically the foundation for our underwater forests and home to thousands of species.
That's left areas of the coast, previously teeming with kelp forests, barren, covered only by a carpet of purple sea urchins. And it's hard to overstate the importance of kelp forests to coastal ecosystems.
So they're home to thousands of species of fish, invertebrates, marine mammals, from little harbor seals to big, enormous gray whales.
Sea otters, if they were here, would have helped keep the urchin population in check.
Part of our hope behind a reintroduction would be putting in place another backstop that really should always have been there.
Correct.
Now, Hayson said there has been some hesitation from folks in the fishing and crabbing industries, but
we are working closely to have one-on-one conversations with these individuals and figure out what's the best way to, if there's any negative implications, how to work that through.
So when might we actually have sea otters back in the water in Oregon? There are still several studies to complete and issues to iron out. But earlier this year, tribal leaders from the Confederated Tribes of Siletz and the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians asked the Secretary of the Interior to prioritize the effort. They called upon the federal government to bring sea otters back within the next 5 years. And for Hazen, the 2 sea otters spotted here last month were an inspiring glimpse of what could be.
It was a magical, historical moment, and especially for me as someone who's working very hard to restore our population. It was like a little glimmer of hope of exactly what we could see in the future here off of our coast.
Cale joins me now. Okay, my first question, how do sea otters keep these urchins down?
They eat them.
Oh.
It's pretty simple.
Okay.
You know, they are prolific predators of these things. There's one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite environmental authors, Rachel Carson: "Nothing in nature exists alone." And it's just sort of, this is like the perfect example of how nature sort of has a balance to itself. And when humans intervene, it can often upset that balance.
And how would they create a new colony of sea otters off the Oregon coast?
Another simple answer: they trap them, they bring them down, they release them. This is their natural habitat. They existed here for thousands of years up until the early 1900s. So it's pretty much just a matter of bringing them back, letting them do their thing.
Wow, okay, let's do it. Thanks, Cale, appreciate it. Moving on now, the city of Portland is wrapping up its first month under a new voter-approved government structure. The old structure had elected politicians in charge of huge city agencies. The system created silos where people did not have to cooperate, and sometimes those agencies, called bureaus, ignored the wishes of the mayor or other leaders. Well, the new structure has 6 deputy city administrators over nearly every part of the city of Portland government. They answer to the city administrator, who right now is Mike Jordan. He said the new structure got off to kind of a rocky start the first week or so, but is now showing real results.
Well, a couple of kind of interesting coincidences. In the first week, you know, we had the heat emergency here, and the mayor declared an emergency. And I will tell you, and I want to say some of this is because the county had done a better job also, but I've never had a more coordinated response to a weather emergency like that than we had there. And I think it was because we had the ability to simply reach out directly to bureaus, and they were immediately responsive. And so the coordination was just more fluid. It isn't that we didn't get that kind of cooperation in the past. It's just that it happened faster, and people were more responsive to when emergency management called and said, "We need you here right now," and people would drop everything and move. And that hasn't always been the case with bureaus.
All right, so that's promising. Remember, the difference in the past was that each bureau had its own structure and its own political leader. Now that's gone. The mayor took charge of all the bureaus and then put them under the authority of the city administrator and his deputies. This is the new system that will officially become Portland's government on January 1st, but they started using it July 1st to practice and get it figured out before the new mayor and the council begin in 2025. Jordan said the worldwide computer issue earlier this week was another chance to test the new system.
And then we got a second little coincidental shot for another emergency last week with the cyber thing with Microsoft and the patch. And we literally were, because I think of the ability to engage with the Bureau of Technology Services, and then of course all the user bureaus, and communicate in a more consolidated way through the deputies to their bureaus, that we had emergency services up and running in almost no time. And in fact, we didn't miss any 911 calls. I will admit, we were taking calls on the phone and writing in notepads for about an hour. But we didn't drop any calls. The police were back up and running really quickly. And so we were able to deploy people very rapidly overnight to places like precincts and like to the Emergency Communications Center to be able to get those end user devices fixed really fast. And I just don't think we would have been that responsive in the past.
All right, now, of course, not everything is going perfectly smoothly. Jordan said one ongoing challenge is how to keep those city commissioners, those elected politicians, informed on what's happening with the bureaus that they used to control, while at the same time keeping them out of the way.
I think the commissioners as a group have been really good about the understanding that we have to start to work this system in a new way if we're going to be ready for January. So it isn't like anybody wants to stop anything. I think it's just old habits. People have been used to doing work a certain way with a set of bureaus that they had authority over, and there are a number of items, policy issues, project issues that have been in flight for a while, and the commissioners have been very involved in those things. And so how do we keep them involved and yet not have them directing work individually?
That's an ongoing issue. We wanted to bring you an update on that because we often point out the shortcomings of the city and the county, and I guess the state as well, because we believe that they can do better. And by putting scrutiny on them, sometimes we help nudge them along. It looks like the city of Portland is starting to do better. It's a hopeful update that makes me really optimistic about the future here. And yes, we'll keep a close eye on it and let you know if things take a turn for the worse. But right now, I got to say, it does sound like things are getting better. And speaking of the city's new form of government, you're looking at the list of candidates who at this point have qualified to have their name on the ballot for mayor in November. There are 9 candidates so far, with that number expected to grow. Campaign season is in full swing. It's expected to ramp up even more in the next few months. Let's take a look at the campaign finances. Rene Gonzalez has raised the most money through the city's small donor elections program, $167,000, and he's received 4 bigger donations over $1,000. Nancy Congdon, who has not yet qualified for the ballot, and Leave Otis have each taken in other big donations, just one, but their overall fundraising is much lower. Carmen Rubio has the highest number of individual donations, 1,173 people, for a total of $102,000. Keith Wilson is in 3rd place for the small donor funding, ahead of current city commissioner Mingus Mapps, who is in 4th. Speaking of Mr. Mapps, his campaign is deeply in debt. He owes almost $8,000, but he's not the only one in the red. Both Nancy Congdon and Durrell Kinsey Bay have negative cash balances. Rubio, Gonzalez, and Wilson have the most cash on hand right now. There is still plenty of time for things to change, so we'll be keeping an eye on what happens in the next couple of months. The filing deadline is August 27th, so just over a month away from now. There's still time for other candidates to jump into the race for mayor. As for city council, well, we already know that one's going to be wild. Each district has a lot of people running. District 1, much of East County, has 10 candidates so far. District 2, which is North and Northeast Portland, has 8. District 3, much of Southeast Portland, has 11 candidates. And District 4, which is the west side, including downtown, has, get this, 21 candidates already. Each district will elect 3 people to the new 12-person council. Now, we talked today with the Portland City Club. They say that they are gearing up for a busy election season and planning some debates in the coming months. They say the change in government is giving the city much wider range of candidates.
We're going to have geographic diversity. I think we're going to have diversity in income of city council members. Traditionally, I think many folks on city council have been homeowners rather than renters. I think we're going to have diversity in every way imaginable, in terms of race, in terms of age, and it's going to give folks in Portland a real opportunity to engage in this election, in something brand new for us.
Speaking of brand new, for the first time, the city election will feature ranked choice voting. You can try it out for yourself. The City Club has an event coming up on August 6th at Lincoln High School. They'll be holding a mock election with ranked choice voting and then tallying the results right then and there so you can look at it and see how it all works. The event, by the way, is free. You can register at pdxcityclub.org. Coming up next on The Story, we're hearing from the former track coach at Lake Oswego High School who's suing the district after his contract was not renewed. He says it's because of a letter he sent the state after he saw a transgender athlete from another school win several girls' track events. We'll have the details when The Story returns. As we're gearing up for the Olympics, this is an interesting sports story. Across the country, there's an ongoing debate over how transgender athletes should participate in sports that are separate by gender. A track coach in Lake Oswego says he wants transgender athletes to compete in a separate division. But he says once he brought his concerns to the school district, they fired him. Now he's suing the school district. We talked to Coach John Parks this afternoon. He's been coaching for about 40 years, the past 2 years at Lake Oswego High School. In May, he says he sent a letter to the Oregon School Activities Association, also known as the OSAA, after seeing a transgender athlete from another school win several girls' track events.
The transgender athletes that were competing and running fast, I could see, just knowing how a sophomore boy is going to develop. I wrote a state a letter and said, this kid's going to keep getting better and better. I mean, it's just, this is just naturally going to happen. And it's going to, take away from the efforts of the girls. And this kid doesn't deserve the scorn he may face, or that they may face. I don't know which way they've preferred to be referred to as, but she or they, but that they're going to face. And so I was concerned about it from my kids and my parents who are voicing their concerns.
OSAA's policy is to allow transgender athletes to compete with their gender identity. Parks was accused of encouraging spectators to boo the transgender athlete and asking coaches to boycott medals presentations. He denies those accusations, by the way. But the Lake Oswego School District told him that the evidence showed that he had engaged in discrimination and harassment and that his contract would not be renewed. The district did not comment on the lawsuit and told us back in June that his contract expired. Parks' attorney says this is a First Amendment violation.
Public employees, and certainly school teachers, public school teachers get caught up in this a lot, like Coach Parks has been caught up in it. They do not forfeit their First Amendment free speech rights just because they're public employees. So as long as they're speaking as a private citizen, okay, on a matter of public concern, then they're allowed to do that. And their public school employer in this situation cannot retaliate against them.
The Human Rights Campaign calls the battle over trans girls in sports an attack on transgender rights. They say, well, it may be true that a particular transgender youth has physical abilities that help them in the sport of their choice. Natural variations in physical characteristics are part of sports. Like all other youth, trans youth are short and tall, strong and not, fast and slow. Still to come on the story. New details on deflection in Multnomah County announced just hours ago. Blair Best has the update, and she also talked to parents whose kids attend a preschool just a block away from the new deflection center. That's all coming up next when the story returns. An update today in Multnomah County's efforts to combat drug use. The county will open a deflection center in September when possession of hard drugs once again becomes a crime in Oregon. Now, this afternoon, we heard from the county that those who are eligible for deflection, as in the only crime that they're committing is drug possession and they have no other warrants, well, those people will have 30 days to engage in recovery services. And if they don't, and they're caught again with drugs by police within 30 days after that first encounter, well, then they're going straight to jail. As Blair Best reports, this has been a point of controversy for the neighborhood where the deflection center is located, including a preschool just 1 block away.
On the corner of Southeast Pine Street and 11th Avenue in Portland's Central East Side sits a preschool.
My 1-year-old son will be a student there starting in September.
At the same time, Multnomah County will open a center for people caught using drugs who choose treatment over jail time. That center will be 1 block away from the school.
So it's basically a funnel of individuals using drugs right into the neighborhood. The county is racing towards an artificial September 1 deadline.
And that's when possession of drugs like fentanyl will be a crime again in Oregon. Counties had the option of opening deflection centers, places to connect people with recovery services instead of jail. In late developments Friday, the county's deflection team told KGW people who choose this option must complete a screening and will have 30 days to enroll in those services. If they don't, and they get caught again, they'll be arrested.
I think it's a problem. It's a controversial development in the community, to say the least, and it was developed with no community input and kind of sprung on us at the 11th hour. Total surprise.
And David Watnick is among the parents who testified in front of county commissioners earlier this week. Commissioner Sharon Myron voted against the deflection center plan despite it passing.
It was painful because the parents came in desperate for answers, and all they got were more questions and more deflection of responsibility.
There's no consideration of the neighborhood and how that might be impacted.
Now, it's no secret the area surrounding the daycare has been impacted by the homeless and addiction crisis for years, but parents feel that once the deflection center moves in, it could make things even worse.
I get where they're coming from. At the same time, they got to understand that there's a bunch of homeless people that live around here too, that also do drugs. There's crime. If that's going to be there to help the people who are on drugs and do crime, then let it be there. That's how I see it. But I mean, at the same time, I still understand because those are kids.
In a statement, the county told KGW Friday they're committed to being a good neighbor, ensuring an orderly environment, and will provide on-site security.
The only deflection that the county seems able to do is deflection of responsibility.
None of us want to have another mess of another program that New York Times and everywhere in the country is going to say, look at Portland, look at where they're messing up. We want to do it right. We want this to be open. We just want to know how it works, how our kids are safe, how can we participate. And right now it's closed door. Our leadership team is working on that, and that's it.
Now, some parents are calling on the county to pause this deflection program or cancel it altogether. There are even talks of potential litigation if they don't. In Southeast Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
Thank you, Blair. That, by the way, is the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. Hey, here's a programming reminder for you. We are not going to have a show for the next couple of weeks. We'll be back on August 12th. It's because of the Paris Olympics. Here's what our daily news schedule is going to look like during that time. We'll have normal newscasts from 6:30 till 7 p.m., followed by the Olympic Zone at 7:30, and then the late news at 11. The story team's going to be hard at work over the next couple of weeks preparing some great stories for our return. In the meantime, David and Christine are back next with our local headlines. Then enjoy the Olympics right here on KGW. Primetime coverage of the opening ceremony begins tonight at 7:30. We'll leave you with a live look from Paris.